we've posed in Mentimeter for you to think about. The first question is, how confident are you that you know what's important to care leavers? The second is, how confident are you that you're providing the right services for care leavers? And the third question is, what helps you make changes to the services for care leavers? If you haven't used Mentimeter before, you can just open another tab on your computer and or on any device and type in the website www.menti.com, and then it should ask you for a code, which is 72973302. Or if you're really savvy, you can use the QR code, and if you use your phone, then it will just take you to the Menti, and then you can just ask the question, answer the questions about care leaver services. So Richard, if you wanted to stop sharing, I can pull up the answers. Thank you. So obviously there's no right or wrong answer to these. It's just for you to reflect on how you work with care leavers and how confident you feel knowing what is important to them. So hopefully you should see that. Some answers coming through. So I can see that the confidence across the group is varied. Some people feeling very confident that they know what is important to their care leavers, and other people saying, actually, I'm not as confident that I know what is important. So quite a range of answers here. Kind of ranging kind of on a 3 all the way up to a 9, and 10 is completely confident, and I can see that we don't have anybody who has answered that they are completely confident that they know exactly what is important to care leavers. And then the second is how confident that you're providing the right services for care leavers. And again, we've got a variety of answers here. Somebody's saying that they're not confident. Other people saying that they're less confident. But we've got people who are answering kind of a 6, 7, 8, that they are confident, but they're not completely confident at a number 10. So again, a really interesting range of answers from that question. And then finally, what helps you know that you're making the right chances, the right changes to services. So some people are saying that they're not sure. Quite a few people saying kind of good relationships, communication, creating opportunities to share problems and ideas. Voice is really important. We've got quite a few people saying that listening and hearing from young people, but also that policies and local authority guidelines also helps you make changes to care leaver services. Sometimes it's about the team and the people that you've got around you, so passionate teams, working with them through issues to get a better understanding of barriers and challenges they encounter, receiving feedback about what's working and what's not working so well, never standing still and always striving for better outcomes for our care leavers. Love that. We've got innovation. So lots of comments about ensuring that you've got good feedback from young people, listening, but that actually it's always a journey. It's always about continually looking and striving and making changes. And And then we've got kind of making sure that we're linking with key partners and that we're linking to the government, that we're linking to guidance and services that are outside of just the care leaver service. And senior management commitment and leadership, good action plans, bright spots evidence, and the scrutiny by young people. So that's really interesting feedback about what you're already doing to make changes to services for care leavers. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to stop sharing to let Richard share. I will be providing you all with all of this at the end of the session as well. So thank you. Back over to Ian.
Thank you for that, Emma. So I think well, we're plunging to darkness. I think the next bit is where I'm going to pass the baton on to my colleague, Dr. Baker, who's going to help us pick a little bit more about sort of what helps New Belongings work.
Great, and it's really good to see lots of you here this lunchtime, so thanks so much for joining us. And I'll just take a little bit of time to try to unpick a bit more about New Belongings and what are reflections on some of the things that facilitated and helped it to work. And really we kind of came down to sort of 5 cornerstones, and I'll talk you through these in a bit more detail. And the first one, you'll be unsurprised to hear, given what I just saw in all your responses, was that kind of ambition and that thread of co-production. And whilst New Belongings local authorities would say they didn't get there per se always, they were on a journey towards co-production. It was absolutely key in the programme about listening to what young people said was important, but then of course doing something about that and working together with young people on solutions. So that was the kind of first thread for the project. And then I think a really strong message is leaving care teams cannot do this on their own. We've got to have our senior leadership, both political and senior management teams, understanding care leavers, passionate about our young people. There's simply doors that a leaving care team manager can't open on their own, and we need everybody kind of round the table and shouting and raising the profile. Again, we can't do this when we're incredibly busy, and I know that will be reflected in your diaries, your meetings, and who's at your desk. But we do need to create some capacity to actually deliver these things. Listening to young people is really hard. Doing something about it's really hard, and we didn't kind of duck those messages in the project. So trying to create some stability in the teams and some capacity to do this is essential. And a bit linked to point 2 really is that wide range of partners. So in New Belongings, we included community partners in that. So it was very much a local project about local solutions with local young people. So that whole range, both across your local authorities, but thinking wider, you've got some really good things, hopefully on your doorstep, hopefully, still open in these difficult times. So the 4th point was really about partnership working. And the 5th kind of thing we identified really was peer learning. So maybe something happening up in the Northwest, it's bound to be being grappled with down on the South Coast. So, sharing and learning from each other. And so really they were the 5 cornerstones. At the end of the month, we're going to release more on this in a report called The Story of New Belongings. So you'll be able to dive into that more. So they were the cornerstones of the programme, and then they were supported by 2 key tools, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them. So there's the Your Life Beyond Care tool, which is a survey, and then something called the Baker-Dixon self-assessment. And both of these tools we think help our local authorities to understand how their care leavers are doing, and then, like we said, do something about it. So about the development of those action plans. So next slide. Thanks, Richard. And then this is just a visual of the kind of process and those building blocks, really. So right at the beginning, from our local authority selection, we wanted to get that commitment. So those who applied to join the programme had to have that senior buy-in. We needed a letter from the political cabinet. We needed sign up from senior managers right at the beginning. And then we did a round of kind of baseline evidence, and I'll tell you more about that survey and the self-assessment tool. That then led to the action planning, and again, that thread of co-production. And we learned lots about ways that young people, young adults may or may not want to get involved, and flexibility was the key, really. And then we needed some time to actually implement those action plans, and we've got 2 local authorities on the webinar today, and I'm really excited that they're going to tell you about some of their local solutions. And then towards the end of the programme, we did some follow-up evidence to help going forward in terms of next steps. Next slide, thanks, Richard. So we like our diagrams here. So here's a different way of essentially looking across those 5 areas. And what I would say is it's a model, is New Belongings. It's an approach. And, you know, in each of the 8 local authorities, these things were in place to differing degrees. So if we went on to the next slide, I'll just reflect on one of them a little bit more. So in terms of the co-production, we actually ran a webinar on this last week, so you'll be able to look at that and go back over those resources. But essentially in the triangle, these are the different ways we felt we were trying to encourage our local authorities to work alongside their young adults. So what was really important, as I've said, is setting those expectations from the start. This wasn't an add-on. We were trying to make this a core thread. Using a tool like the survey, Your Life Beyond Care, about trying to shift performance dashboards, trying to shift where the focus is actually onto what young people say matters to make life good. And then a lot of things come out of the evidence. So where do you focus your attention in busy lives? So what are young people's priorities? And they might not always match up with service priorities. So we tried to do some work around making sure what young people felt they wanted to see in the action plans actually ended up. And then the joint working on the ideas. And of course, I saw somebody put in scrutiny and reviewing. So young people, not necessarily the same young adults at the same points. So a little bit more there on the co-production, but as I said, we've got lots of resources on this. And Richard, if we looked at the next point, which was just to reiterate that commitment from our senior leadership. You know, we did different things, trying to get people sign up to be champions, sending letters to CEOs. From Mark Riddell sent a letter, he was on our advisory, you know, really trying to raise that profile of care leavers, young people being invited along to senior managers meetings, you know, getting a seat at the table, you know, inching along with the progress. Thanks, Richard. Yep, and again, we won't labour the point, but that whole range of partners who you've got in your local area, who you can get to the table, what they can offer. And there's just some of the ways we try to invite partners to the launch. They were a real key contributor to the self-assessment, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. There's something about asking partners to actually review what they contribute that may shine a light on what they maybe don't contribute, and maybe, you know, some accountability and some ideas of other things they can do to support our young people. So if we went to the next slide, I just tell you about the New Belongings tools. So we use the Your Life Beyond Care tool. Lots of you will know this. It's part of the Bright Spots programme. It's a co-produced survey. It's been used in over 40 local authorities. Over 7,000 care leavers nationally across the UK have already taken part. And for me, the thing, if I'm ever describing it really quickly, it's about subjective well-being and what makes life good. So really trying to get back to that opportunity to think about our services and trying to understand how care leavers feel, and then actually responding in relation to that. So rather than trying to get care leavers to fit into services, putting things the other way round. And you can see our response rates in the 8 local authorities. So we had about 50% of all the care leavers from the 8 local authorities the first time, and the second time we ran it, just under 50%. It's not the only way to listen to your young people. It's one of the ways to listen. And the second tool was the self-assessment tool, which draws on evidence around what an ideal leaving care survey would look like. And both these tools were instrumental in New Belongings right at the beginning to get that real look at how things were going in order to build those action plans. So next slide, thanks. So here you've got the Your Life Beyond Care survey. These are the wellbeing indicators. And like I said, what I really like about them is they come from young adults, from care leavers, and they're not what we always focus on. So if we just clicked through, Richard, relationships, what comes out really strongly is trust. That's absolutely what young people talked about. So how can services respond, opportunities to spend time together, things like the phone or your access to the internet. Young people really clear that your phone is somewhere you store your memories, helping you feel less lonely, a way to keep in touch, find out information. But I don't really see, or I didn't used to see pre-pandemic, phones and internet as much, but they're so important to our young people and what makes life good. Again, friendships, really important, always coming out in the survey results as top source of emotional support. And I think the last one is pets. Again, you know, non-judgmental, love you for who they are, and, you know, can add so much to our lives. I think lots of people might agree. So they're some of the things care leavers reflected, and each local authority got a report based on their local findings. And so if I was just to go to the next slide, Richard, alongside the survey results, each of the New Belongings local authorities were asked to complete something called the Leaving Care Services Self-Assessment Framework. I'm always a little bit embarrassed when I present on this because it's also known as the Baker-Dixon self-assessment, and that's because it was used in a previous evaluation of New Belongings. So the Department for Education in that previous New Belongings wanted myself and Joe Dixon as researchers to evaluate New Belongings. And we said, well, how will we measure whether, you know, services are improving? We don't have any national leaving care standards at present. And so we developed this self-assessment framework based on the transitions guidance, the Ofsted framework, and research. And what it tries to do is it's based on it's a gold standard in leaving care. And local authorities are invited to kind of assess their current strengths and their current areas for development. And as this manager said, it makes you think about where you are now, highlights areas for focus and sharing with partners and joint ownership. And often it's not the results per se, That's the only important bit, but actually the process of getting everybody round the virtual table or in person and actually going through the self-assessment. So I think last slide from me, Ian and Richard, would be just to tell you there's 10 areas in the self-assessment. All the new belongings local authorities went through this, and what you would do under each of those areas is there's a number of indicator statements, and you're simply going to be saying, you know, honestly appraising, do I agree at present we're meeting this, or do I mostly disagree? There's 106 indicators. So again, it's quite a commitment to doing the full assessment. Of course, it can be done in parts. And so that's how New Belongings started, really, with this evidence base. And, you know, we're going to go on and hear about what people did as a result of all of that listening and work. So I'm going to pass over to Ian, who's going to share a short film to kind of tune us back into young people's views on what makes life good. Thank you.
Richard, I think after that you could just play it, actually, please. So a very short video, but I think quite pointedly some messages there from young people about what makes life good for them. Friends, families, opportunities, money, friendships, you know, and being able to enjoy themselves. All the things that probably we thought was important to us when we were that age as well, actually. Yeah, actually, as corporate parents, how often do we build plans on that? How often do we measure that? You know, so I think one of the things we were looking to do in one of the things we was very clearly looking to do in New Belongings was to take those messages and work with local authorities to try and develop those plans. So just what I'm going to do in this section is just look a little bit more about how local authorities develop those plans. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Richard. So the principles that we had for planning was that all the plans had to be based on an evidence base, i.e. the Your Life Beyond Care survey or the self-assessment which Claire has explained to you. That it had to be young people and local authorities had to work together jointly to develop and identify solutions. So it wasn't young people said, we feel lonely, and the assistant director or the head of leaving care says, oh, I know what the solution to that is, we'll do this. It was then about actually what the young people think are the solutions to that. What are their priorities on homelessness? Oh, sorry, on isolation to try and deal with. Clearly, any plan has to be measurable. But measurable for young people. You have to be able to explain to young people that you told us this, we agreed together we were going to do this, and this is how far we've got to it. So, you know, slightly different from the perhaps more traditional dashboard approach that we all see in our local authority world. There had to be corporate parent involvement, and Claire has gone through that. And the governance of these plans had to sit at director level, chief exec, because again, as we talked about earlier, as leaving care managers, you cannot make these changes on your own. You have to have someone with a bit of clout, a bit of authority, and your partners involved. So from all this massive information that local authorities got, we said, please pick 4 or 5 areas or themes for you to work on. And if we go to the next slide, Richard, we will, and click on from the next slide from that, please. We will see the areas that local authorities work on. So one of the positive things for all local authorities is their leaving care support. You cannot underestimate how important leaving care services are to young people and how much they value them. So all local authorities had an action or actions around improving their leaving care services. Accommodation, not surprisingly, was there, and you can see the other ones. So what I'll do is just move now to the next slide when we'll look a little bit more detail about what some of those messages were from young people about accommodation. So when young people completed the Your Life Beyond Care survey, when we added together and aggregated the responses from across the 8 authorities, 68% of young people said they always felt safe where they lived, i.e. 32% didn't always feel safe where they lived. And that varied between the 8 authorities. Some were slightly higher than that or slightly lower, etc., as you'd expect. 62% of young people said they felt safe in their neighbourhood, or 38% don't feel safe in their neighbourhood. And 53% said they always felt settled in their accommodation. Now, yes, leaving care is a time of transitions, but actually just over half of young people felt settled in their accommodation. You know, you perhaps would expect higher figures than that. And really interestingly, if you compare those messages to what you as local authority managers will be feeding back to the Department for Education about young people in suitable accommodation. Now, it is a slightly different measure, but we would say 85% of our young people are suitably accommodated, yet only 68% said they felt safe. So there's a real contrast between what we measure as professionals, but the messages from our young people. And for one authority, when they got that experience of that lived experience of their young people, they thought long and hard about how to deal with it. So, well, in fact, all 8 did, but I'll now move on to the next slide. And we'll look at what Wandsworth did. So Wandsworth, and this case example, we will give you links to these at the end through our resource bank. So Wandsworth developed something called Future House, because what they found when they went back to their young people, there was a real sense of a lack of transparency. So they got their figures and then they went back and had further conversations. As Claire says, you know, Your Life Beyond Care isn't the only way to gather information. There was a real concern about lack of transparency. So they said, so they worked with young people to produce a guide, a classic local authority response, isn't it? Well, if you're uncertain, we'll give you a booklet, then everything will be clear. But they actually worked with young people to say, what is it that you want us to explain? It wasn't just the team manager and the head of housing going off to do it. It was working with young people about what is it that's really important that you understand? What information should we be putting in there? But the accommodation guide was developed through this idea of Future House, which were sort of meetings every couple of months with young people, with housing workers and leaving care managers to discuss housing related issues. They produced a myth-busting accommodation guide, but the bi-monthly meetings also led to some other things that are happening. So, for instance, young people actually started talking to senior housing managers about what was important to them about their accommodation. It was agreed that young people would actually attend contract monitoring meetings with their head of contracting. So actually discussions, instead of going from how many voids have you got, was to actually how safe is it where you live? Actually light bulbs in corridors. Actually, what is it like when you've got constantly changing staff? Oh, yes, we come back late at night and we might be worse for wear, but actually we want to feel safe when we come home. We want to know that we're going to be met by staff that we know, who know how to deal with us if we're not, you know, if we're perhaps under the influence of something or we're distressed or upset. So all of a sudden the tenor of contract monitoring meetings started to change. questions like levels of repair, access to Wi-Fi suddenly became a more more of an issue in their discussions. So what we saw in Wandsworth was, you know, young people being right involved right the way through, supported to be in those meetings with housing providers to start to shape policies and practice, and actually prioritising those changes based on what young people said would make a difference to them. And, you know, I think Wandsworth are going to face huge challenges because they're an inner city London authority, you know, but, you know, there is a sense that they're working together with their young people. The young people are feeling, going back to that word I shared at the start, empowered, and their voices are being heard. So if we move on to the next slide, Richard, please. I think this is enough now from hearing from us at you hearing from us at Quorum Voice. What we're going to do now is hand over to our colleagues in Hertfordshire to talk about some of the work that they've been doing, and hopefully this will stimulate questions for you. Do put them in the chat, and my colleague Claire will monitor that, and we'll hopefully have a Q&A session at the end, although I have to say that our colleagues do need to leave at 1 o'clock. But anyway, over to Jonathan and Sam.
Lovely, thank you. I think I'm starting this. So my name's Sam Jeffery. I a very long title, it's not that fancy. Separated Migrant Children and Care Leavers Service Manager in Hertfordshire. And myself, along with Jonathan Jack, have been involved in the New Belonging programme for the last 3 years, and have done a lot over the last 3 years to move this forward. So we're going to talk a bit about co-produced standards and our journey about co-production in Hertfordshire and what we've been able to achieve. So next slide, please. So one of our proudest moments out of New Belongings was the co-production of some care leaver service standards, and it was really true co-production with our care leaver group and with our young people around. So one of the things that came out of the New Belongings programme was feedback was that young people didn't know from us what they could expect from their leaving care PAs, and that was quite a surprise to me as a service manager, that they weren't sure what they were entitled to, and we thought we got it sorted with our local offer and all sorts of things, and we were shocked to find out that actually no, there was much more work that needed to be done. So the idea of a co-produced standards leaflet as a little kind of 2-pager, keeping it as simple as possible, came about, and we worked incredibly hard with our care leaver group to go through line by line for our leaflet exactly what was needed. And there was a few different sort of areas. So it was contact with your worker, supporting you at meetings and helping with the forms, and you'll see from this PowerPoint, which I won't read out, all of the detail that went into that, exactly how often you could expect to be, hear from your leaving care worker, how often you would be visited, what kind of things they would do with you. So they won't do things for you, but they will do things alongside you and then support you to become independent in that action. Next slide, please. Lovely. So our leaflet, and at the end, I think the next slide to this is a photo or a copy of our leaflet. So you'll see it when it comes to life a little bit more, and the colour and the visuals are a little bit nicer. And then what happened was our co-production journey off the back of New Belongings led into a new corporate parenting strategy in Hertfordshire, aptly named by our young people. So our children in care and our care leavers named it our exciting life-changing plan. And lots of visuals were used. So we got our young people to do the artwork. We simplified, really kind of overhauled 3 strategies. So previously we'd had the corporate parenting strategy, the care leaver strategy, and the child looks after strategy, and we kind of all sat there and said, this is a bit ridiculous, why have we got 3 strategies when we can have 1? So we really went back and simplified it as much as possible and used young people friendly language. We used the survey results from Bright Spots and New Belongings, and we used the words of our children in care and our care leavers to be our outcomes to our strategy. So it was really the voice of our children, young people throughout our corporate parenting document. And again, like I say, Our young people fed back they really liked the graphics, the speech bubbles, the strategy name. And then as a result of that, we looked at our corporate strategy board, our corporate parenting board, and we realised that we didn't quite have it right. It wasn't as multi-agency as it needed to be. And again, like Ian spoken about earlier, and Claire spoke about, it isn't just about, and we realised this really early on, it isn't just about what we were going to do as a local authority. We had to get different services, agencies, and the community on board with their corporate parenting responsibilities as well. So we looked at our corporate parenting board and we said, this isn't working. We're not achieving what we need to achieve, and we have restructured that. And we are just at the point of changing that journey. So we're now going to have an executive corporate parenting board and then a more of an operational corporate parenting board. And our exec board will be multi-agency, with very senior leaders across different agencies, and will be chaired by our chief executive, because he is incredibly committed and passionate about making the lives of our children looked after and care leavers better. Next slide, please. And this is actually, I've got it wrong. So I thought we had a visual of our care leaver standards leaflet, and I'm happy for that to be sent out as Coram Voice. Do have a copy of that if anyone wants to see it. And I'm going to hand over to Jonathan for this part.
Thanks, Sam. What you can see on the slide in front of you is a document that we circulated to all care leavers in Hertfordshire as a means of getting as many people as possible involved in our plan. So I don't know if it's the same for you as it was for us, but we've got a small-ish group of very committed young people that we know we can rely upon to come to meetings, to voice the concerns of care leavers. But what we really wanted to do was to extend that reach to a far wider audience, to a far greater group. Now, Hertfordshire's probably got a lot more care leavers in county than some of the others that took part in New Belongings. We're a large shire county, and we're really keen to get as many people involved. So we produced the document that you can see on the screen. And this is only a small part of it. So we identified all the elements within our New Belongings plan where we wanted to co-produce with young people. And then we created a flyer that we sent out to everyone that we were aware of and were working with, and said, this is what we plan to do, and this is what we want you to do, and this is the time commitment. And the intention was to pull as many people in as possible, so that the actual New Belongings plan had a greater range of voices. We heard from people that we'd not heard before, or that their voices were perhaps not kind of reflected in the plans as much as what we'd liked to happen. So this started at the 2020, at the start of the kind of the process, and we did attract a lot of interest. It was difficult sustaining that interest through the various lockdowns, and I think had we not had that and were able to do more face-to-face and build those relationships, we may have kind of finished with a greater number. But we did find it an effective way of pulling new people into the group, and this is probably something we're going to take forward in future plans to make sure that we hear from a wider variety of young people.
Jonathan, thank you, and Sam, thank you very much for that. So what we, just before we come into a question, chance for you to ask some questions, pose some questions of the presentation, what we wanted to do was to share with you a short video that Hertfordshire have put together and shared at our celebration event, which I think describes a little bit more about their journey around over the years about involving young people. So Richard, if you can just play this video through, please. Thank you very much for that, Sam and Jonathan. So we've got 5 minutes now, and I just wanted to, if I can go over to my colleague Claire. Do you want to, Claire? Do you want to? Are there any thoughts you have about picking up ideas that to ask Jonathan and Sam about their work?
Thanks to you both for that. That was really helpful, and I think it's really hard to remember everything in a 3-year journey. So I thought you did really good, and I love the way the film is honest and reflective. There's a slide in the film around partners, and you've got library and voluntary sector partners. I didn't know if either of you wanted to just share a little bit more about opening doors and different conversations, you know, is what I would be wondering, if that was okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. And what I will say is the Baker-Dixon tool was actually one of the door openers for us. So the first time that we did it, however, and it was an extensive, I remember it vividly, it was an extensive piece of work to do, but we did it with our partner agencies. We pulled our local police force in, our mental health services and all of that. And we fed back to them some of our survey results as well. So they were at our dissemination meetings. And that information, you can't argue with it, knowing that this percentage of Hertfordshire care leavers that completed, it's really difficult not to respond to. And the self-assessment really allowed us to challenge ourselves and be really honest, actually, as a local authority and as, you know, outside agencies as to how well we were responding to the needs of care leavers in Hertfordshire. And we had very healthy debates as to what we thought, what others thought they were doing, and were able to come to sort of a common ground on it. But it genuinely, I think, was one of the most powerful parts of this programme, bar our co-production, which is the most powerful part, to open doors and get people to think differently and say, actually, I've got responsibility here and I need to change this. And they took it away, and we started having some really, really interesting, powerful conversations with partner agencies.
Oh, thanks, Sam. And I think it's about partnership, as you said. It's not about blame, but it does help to shine that light on, you know, a self-assessment is that honest appraisal of where are we really. And yeah, the tool tries to map out what a gold standard service looks like according to our legislation and guidance and research evidence. Great. Ian, am I handing over to you to welcome Jeanette? I can see you here, and I'm really excited to hear more from Stockport as well. So I think we had you introducing Stockport, so we'll do a little baton handover, and we'll all remember to unmute. So which I failed. Thanks very much.
So just finally, thank you very much to our colleagues in Sam and Jonathan, and just to remind delegates on the call that all at the end of the session, Richard will, who's supporting us all and keeping everything working smoothly in the background, we'll send you an email with these various presentations on and that video that of Hertfordshire, and we'll post all the material up on our New Belongings website. And when you visit that, you'll also be able to see the material from last week's session as well. So I think, as Claire said earlier about people having very, very busy diaries, well, I know that Sam and Jonathan have got a meeting starting in 1 minute's time, and I know that Jeanette had to come out of her placement panel 5 minutes early to make sure she was in for this session. So thank you both, all three of you, for juggling diaries. And with that, I'll hand over to Jeanette to talk about some of the work in Stockport and how New Belongings has helped them shape services there. So over to you, Jeanette.
Thanks, Ian, and good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jeanette Warburton. I'm the Principal Lead for Social Care, and it's a delight to be here actually to talk about New Belongings and to talk about the changes that it's made in Stockport. So I've put a few slides together just to sort of give a bit of an overview of our journey with New Belongings, and then to illustrate, I think I just chose 3 examples of where it's really made a big impact for our young people here in Stockport. So I just wanted to share those with you. There are, in fact, many more examples I could have chose, but I've got quite a restricted time on the presentation, so I'm more than happy to talk to anybody outside of this session. So just in terms of a bit of an overview, so we'll just move on to the next slide, please, Ian. So just to say, in terms of Stockport, we've been involved with New Belongings for what feels like many, many years. So we were actually involved in the New Belongings in 2003, which was the first wave, and that was as a Greater Manchester cluster. And then we enjoyed it so much the first time, and we made so many improvements the first time round that we applied again to be part of the second wave, which, as you know, was 2020 to 2022. So it's a 2-year programme. So again, I just wanted to share sort of our thoughts really in Stockport about the New Belongings programme, being very much a very inclusive approach, promoting understanding with stakeholders, as well as working very closely with our young people, understanding their lived experiences and looking at co-production of priorities for the service, as well as the action plan to drive the areas that we work on and for improvements for them. The standout points for us from this second wave have very much been the young person's survey. So we've run that twice over the 2-year period, once at the start and once a second time earlier this year. Each time we've had a response rate of round about 80%. So I think we had 80% for the first time and 81% this year, which for us is really fantastic, because what that says to us is that our young people want to tell us about our services, and they want to tell us where we can improve our services, more importantly for me, certainly. So obviously I am wondering about the 19% that haven't been able to do the survey and how we can reach them the next time that we do the survey, hopefully. But 81% out of 220 young people for us is remarkable in terms of actually listening to our voices of our young people and how we go about involving them, those young people, with these service improvements. The other area that's quite noteworthy is the self-assessment, and I've just heard colleagues from Hertfordshire talking about the self-assessment. And again, we did that as a service. It was a very big meeting, but again, it just provided the opportunity for us as a service to look at what are our strengths, where are our areas for development, and more importantly, what are the actions that we need to do to improve. So again, it just offers us a different view across the domains that really just helps to focus your thoughts around practice, really, and practice improvement. The other area that's really nice to read from the report that you get back when you've done the survey and the self-assessment is the practice bright spots. How nice is it that young people tell you what you do really well, and that's highlighted in a report. So again, for us, the fact that we have consistent personal advisors supporting young people, that our young people tell us that they feel they've got trusted relationships with those personal advisors, you know, that's just pleasure for us in terms of that's what we're trying to achieve as a restorative council. And it's really good that we can hear that said back to us by our young people. Another strength of the New Belongings programme is certainly around the co-production. So the dissemination event that's then sort of shared with our young people and key stakeholders and councillors, again, provides a really good opportunity for everybody to be invested in the action plan and the priorities for our young people for that year. And then using that action plan to raise awareness with our chief executive, corporate leadership team, councillors, to really drive and own that change across the council. It just provides a framework and a platform that's quite systematic, actually, in terms of delivering that message and really driving that improvement forward. So they're just some of the highlights from the New Belonging approach. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll just talk through some of the changes that we've seen in Stockport. So from the survey, one of our findings was that young people told us that they didn't always feel safe in their accommodation and didn't always feel settled in their accommodation. So 36% told us they didn't always feel safe. which as corporate parents, you know, we were quite struck by that, because we report to the Department for Education, you know, numbers in suitable accommodation of 97 and 98% in suitable accommodation. So it really made us think, really, and really challenged us around. So if we're reporting such high numbers of suitable accommodation according to the guidance, but yet our young people are telling us they don't always feel safe in that accommodation, we've got something there that we need to understand. So we embarked on a bit of a deep dive research project into really getting underneath the lived experiences of our young people about what safety meant for them, the areas that they were living in, and more importantly, what we can do to support them in the immediate and in the longer term around feeling more safe in their accommodation. And to be fair, the young people come back to us, and basically the findings were that they wanted to pilot the Ring doorbell, the Ring video doorbell. We got a bundle with an Alexa package, £125. We had 8 young people pilot the doorbell with overwhelmingly positive feedback. They just instantly felt safer. They could see on their phones what was happening. Noises at night time, they could look and see what was going on. And for us, it was a bit of a no-brainer that for such a nominal cost, to be able to roll that out to all our young people moving in tenancies, if it makes one of them young people feel more safer, it's worth doing. So we adopted that package in Stockport in terms of all our young people now have the offer of the Ring doorbell. And since April, I think we've had 20 young people take up that offer. So again, you know, we're monitoring that, we're looking at that, we're seeking feedback on it, and hopefully that will be rolled out even further as we go through the rest of the year and into next year. More importantly, what it highlighted is some of the needs in Stockport for more supported accommodation. So on the back of the first wave, we opened up a 5-bedded staff supported accommodation for post-18 care leavers, and this year we've just opened a 7 independent flats as an extension to that first property as a move on accommodation. But what this research really highlighted for us is the need for more of that supported accommodation with outreach staff support. So the profile that the New Belongings has provided for me is that I presented a presentation to our chief executive and corporate leadership team, who instantly adopted and embrace the recommendation, providing a director for a place to lead and chair an accommodation group. And the business case is now written for 20 more supported flats in Stockport. So again, I'm just waiting for formal approval of that, but the support's there and the work's done, and it's in the process now. The other significant change that came out of this particular stream of work was all the work we'd done on the deep dive with young people basically enabled us to do a Department for Education stay in close bid, and Stockport was awarded 2.4 million for that bid. We had a deeper understanding about what our young people needed. So within our stay in close offer, we'll be providing progression coaches, specialist workers around accommodation, education, employment and training, lifelong links coordinators for repairing relationships with families, but also more significantly for us, a significant amount of funding for a mental health team for care leavers, which, you know, we're really pleased about. And obviously that team will work together for those young people leaving residential care with plans for independent living. So I suppose the point of this example is from a comment from the survey has led to so much more on a responsive level for young people, but more significantly on a strategic level in terms of really investing in our young people's accommodation and really trying to make a difference for their safety and accommodation. So hopefully I'll keep you posted how that develops. The next example, again, one of the big findings from the survey, and it won't be a surprise to anybody on this call, is around the cost of living challenges that our young people are facing, and the financial support and resilience section of the survey, again, basically highlighted that our young people wanted and needed more support around financial resilience and financial support. So some of the things that we've worked with our young people on in Stockport is a bit of a shopping list I've put here. It's not exhaustive, it's just some of the key ones that came to mind. But all our young people have a personal budget of £315. It's a safety net for them that they can spend with their personal advisor. So they agree how they want to spend that. If they want a holiday, if they want emergency food or fuel, if they want to do something or go somewhere, that's entirely up to them. It empowers them to make choices and empowers the personal advisor working with that young person. It also supports budgeting, which is what it's about, and hopefully trying to get them more in tune with managing money. Young people really like it. They like the control it gives them, and they get to use it for some really wonderful things, which is really good. The other area is community food pantries that we've developed in partnership with our Stockport homes. Again, they're slightly different to other food pantries in that they tend to have much more choice. And we also provide volunteering as well in those food pantries for our young people. Something we've done quite recently through household grants, working with our colleagues in regeneration, is we've secured some funding for additional food support. So currently all our young people are getting £50 Asda vouchers every quarter just to supplement their income with food. So they had the first one, I think it was July, August time. They've just had one in Care Leaver Week in October. So they're due to have their next one sort of Christmas time. And then the further one in the new year in March. I'm hopeful that we'll get that money again in the new year. Early indications are that it will be available. So I just keep an eye to that. The other thing we've done is fuel support. Young people again asked for some support with fuel. And again, we got that from the household grant. So all our young people living independently have just received a fuel allowance of £150 one-off payment. And again, we're hopeful that we'll be able to rerun that in the new year. As with many other local authorities on the call, Wi-Fi support, certainly the GM have got an offer of 17 gigabytes. We've just rolled that out to all our young people. And we are working with our colleagues on the Care Leaver Covenant, who have managed to secure us an offer through Sky, which is 35 gigabytes and supports streaming for our young people to be able to make a referral for and have that for free. They also get laptops, training, support, and a lovely laptop bag that they can put their stuff in. We give free Life Leisure memberships with a +1 so they can take a friend. And we have just developed a car club scheme for care leavers. And that was with our colleagues in Enterprise. And this is because a young person wrote a proposal really saying that they wanted some help with buying a car or access to a car now that they'd passed the test. So we haven't actually managed to develop, we've managed to develop the pilot, but we haven't got young people on it as yet because they have to have the licence for 12 months. But the scheme is ready to go when the young people are ready. So they're just sort of illustrations really of when we work with young people and listen to young people, they come up with more accurate things about what they need. And then it really focuses my mind about where I need to focus my efforts to get additional funding, maximise and optimise household grants that are available across the council, or seek funding from social value and other places that things can be available. I suppose that what I'm trying to illustrate here is through the survey and having that relationship with young people, they tell you more about what they want and what they need to be developed, which then improves our services and improves our local offer. But for us to have achieved this in 12 months is quite remarkable, really, in terms of the money that it saved for our young people. So they've had more money to be able to choose to use that in other ways. And then just the last example. I really like this example and it's really new to us. So I'll just wait for Richard to move along. So this one came as a bit of a surprise really for us in Stockport, because what the survey told us is that we've got above average numbers of care leavers that have got pets. It's not something that we've noticed before particularly, but seeing it in black and white in the report that came back, with all the work we've been doing on the cost of living, our young people told us they want a pet pantry, they want some help with their pets. They don't want to be in a position where they're choosing food for themselves or food for their pets. So we did manage to make a relationship with the Blue Cross. And in fact, we had the meeting with them this week, just to look at what local offer we can provide for our care leavers that have got pets. And we've got 48%. So if you think we've got 220 young people in Stockport, that's just over 100 or around about 100 young people with pets, mainly cats and dogs, but some are furry little animals as well. So we've met with the Blue Cross and there's a whole shopping list of offers that they offer now that we're just trying to capture, and we'll put that on our local offer. But more significantly, there's a project starting with Pets or Us in April of next year. And that will be local in Stockport. But in the meantime, they do have a pet store that we can access in Bury. So we are going to be looking at trying to get some food support out there, help with veterinary support, health prevention treatments like flea and worming, as well as the education and advice workshops that the lady's going to be able to meet with our care leaver forum and plan those webinar sessions or face-to-face sessions about how to care for your pet and how to, you know, have a nurturing, loving, lifelong relationship with your pet. So I just think that's a really nice thing we've been able to respond to for our young people. They're really keen on it, and it's good that the survey's highlighted that for us to be able to respond and make improvements in this area. And then just the last slide, just mindful of time. Our journey in Stockport continues. We don't want to be complacent. We don't want to sit back and think, oh, okay, we've done lots of things, but, you know, everything, you know, needs change, and we have to keep on our toes, really. And to be fair, the New Belongings programme has always done that for me. I'm a big fan of the New Belongings programme. It really focuses your mind on what you need to improve and listening to young people to make those improvements with you. But our journey in Stockport continues. We continue to actively listen to our young people, learn from our young people, and make changes that we co-produce with our young people. So that's the end of the Stockport presentation. Like I say, I've selected a few examples. I'm more than happy to talk about any other things we've been doing in Stockport. We're doing a lot with the house project. We're doing a lot with education, employment and training, embedded the care leaver covenant. But I just wanted to keep it to things that would be helpful for other people, really. So I'll pause there, Ian, and hand
Jeanette,
back to yourself for any questions.
Before I hand over to my colleague Claire, who will sort of lead the questions, I think on behalf of everybody, I'd just like to. I've seen the reactions and the claps and the hearts going up. I think it's a fabulous talk through of all the things you've done. I love the thing about the pets. You know, who would have thought that as a leaving care manager you would be having those kind of conversations with Pets R Us, or that might be on your dashboard or your corporate parenting strategy. You know, you just wouldn't think of it. But I think the point I would say before we go to your questions is it's very easy to say, I've just come away from this seminar and say, I've heard this brilliant idea from Stockport. I'm going to cut and paste it into my own action. Of course, if you do that, it may well work. But what's crucial about, I think, what Jeanette has done and Stockport have done is going right back to Claire's initial slides, is they've listened to what young people said was important to them. They've worked out what the priorities are. So the Ring Doorbell scheme absolutely hits a button in Stockport, but it may not do elsewhere, because it may be that you've got unaccompanied asylum seekers who do feel safe and they need something different. So it's not just about, you know, the cut and paste. It's about listening to what your young people says, the principles of then what's their priorities for change. And what shines through, I think, in Jeanette's work is the capacity that you've been able to give to your frontline team, Jeanette, to actually chase down some of those ideas, which I'm sure have led you up many blind alleys. But also you've had senior leadership commitment that have kicked open and pushed open those doors for you. So I think, you know, it's a real example of how it's taken that wider system to make those changes. So with that caveat, I'll hand over to Claire to sort of pick out some questions that reflect what delegates have been saying.
Great, thanks, Ian. And just to echo what Ian said, if you get a chance, Jeanette, some compliments in the chat. So people really appreciating the time you've spent explaining and feeling inspired and saying well done. So just to echo that. And just a question from Sharon Stevenson around, you got an excellent response rate in Stockport to your survey. It's really hard work doing this. There's a whole model behind distribution of the survey. We're really keen that it's seen as a programme, and it's not just a survey, and it uses a trusted adult model. Would you be able to say a little bit more about how you made sure as many of your young people got that chance to make a choice whether they wanted to fill this this way of telling you how they're doing, how life was going? Any reflections on, you know, that part? Was a question from Sharon.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Sharon, because as with many colleagues on the call, we do lots of surveys and sometimes you don't get very good response rates, and then that's really, really difficult because you don't get what you need out of it, or you don't have the evidence to do it. And the approach we took in Stockport is that we spoke to young people and said, look, we're going to be doing this really, really important survey, and it's really important that we reach as many young people as we can because we want to hear what everybody's got to say. What is it that would encourage you to fill in this survey? And no surprise, our young people said, well, if you give us some money for it, we'll do it. So that's what we did. We gave £10 for 10 minutes. And we got 80%, 81% response rate. So 167 young people replied, and they all got £10 for doing it. And the way I look at that is that, to me, that's money well spent, because that's consultation, that's hearing our voices of our young people, valuing and respecting their time and expertise that they're taking to do that survey for us to improve services for them, but also for other young people. So for me, I thought that amount of money, £2,000, was a good investment. And it was as simple as that, Sharon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeanette. And I think incentives are not necessary, not all local authorities choose to do that. There's lots, as you were saying, of hard work about that, young people believing that this is being taken seriously, that we want to listen and we want to do something about this with you. So I think the point you made as well about, you know, it's a big piece of work and we need you, and you know, we want to take you on that journey, is great. And yeah, it's really hard, I imagine, to argue with 4/5 of your care leaver group when you put that, when you're kicking down some of those doors with your other senior colleagues. It's really hard to ignore that noise and din from young people. And I really loved that you also pointed out positive feedback. You know, teams are working so hard, and it you know, compliments, and it's sometimes such a shame the feedback is anonymous, because young people really write, you know, so and so, she's the best, she's like a mum, and there's some really lovely emotional quotes come back as well, I think, as well. So thanks very much.
Claire, it's kind of investor save, because if we get the priorities wrong and we start spending all our time and all our energy and all our focus not doing the thing that's going to make a difference for a young person, then really is that a good use of the time? Whereas if we invest in our young people to find out what's important to them, what makes a difference to them, and we can act on that with them, and they can see that we're working to that priority, then we're working on the right thing. We're giving the message that we're valuing our young people and listening to what they're saying. We're delivering on what they're asking us to deliver and improve. And then it sort of comes back full circle in that they come back to you then and say, well, actually, I know we did this together and you listened to me and you did something. Can we do this now? And I think that's the place that we're at in Stockport, where when I've got young people sending me business cases, which I was quite remarkably amazed at, that, you know, they felt listened to and felt they could write to me and say, can we now work on this? Because this is really important for me, which was a young girl who was in foster care who wanted help accessing a car. Then of course we're going to invest that time in that, because it's important for that young person and it's important for other people. So I think it just develops a different relationship with the young people than just deciding corporately what we're going to work on and get on and do it. And really, it doesn't have the impact that the young people need. So for me, it's actually an invest to save argument, really, about incentivising their voice, because that's what we need to get it right.
Fantastic. And as a researcher, you wouldn't expect me not to agree and say it also impacts on our well-being. You know, feeling, you know, you have a voice, you have some control, and you're making a contribution. You know, the diagram of all those indicators, voice is so central. Thank you, Jeanette. I was going to hand over to Ian to wrap us up, I think, Ian, if that's okay.
I think you are, and again, I think just pass on my thanks, Jeanette. I think the thing that struck me about it, I was just thinking about it. You know, we all talk about corporate parenting, you know, and actually there's a huge emphasis on the corporate bit, because that is the bit that we can all, as professionals, influence. You know, we feel we've got those relationships. But actually, if you think about what some of the things Jeanette has been talking about, you know, if our own birth children had got a pet and were struggling, you know, with the cost of living, we'd find a way of helping them. You know, my daughter, yes, luckily I was in the position to do this, but my daughter needed a car to go to work. I found a way of actually helping her get that. I've now got it sitting outside the front. I've got it back off a bit bent now. But you think of the things that Jeanette has been talking about are actually about what we would do for our own children. And I think if you go right back to the principles of corporate parenting, right back to Frank Dobson in 2000, it is about, is it good enough for my own child? And I think that thing just comes across so powerfully from that message of when you listen to your young people, they tell you what's important. And then if you work with them, you actually get solutions to what they think is important. So again, I think really powerful. Thank you very much indeed. So just to wrap up this session, if we could just move on, Richard, to the next slide, please. So what I want to do is just to make sure that, you know, you don't just come along to this session and think, wow, that was a really good session. But actually, you know, you've got some links and the contacts to carry on the thinking and learning from today. And you obviously seen Jeanette's message there about contacting her directly if you wish to do so. On our New Belongings website, you will find an evaluation of the New Belongings programme, which really interesting stuff. And again, many of the messages that we've shared today have come from the report. If you want to know more about the Bright Spots Your Life, Your Beyond Care survey and the In Care survey, Your Life, Your Care, there's a link there through the website there, the Bright Spots programme. The Baker-Dixon self-assessment will send you out a link to that. Really powerful way of engaging partners, as our colleagues in Hertfordshire were talking about. And apart from the pet one, all the examples that Jeanette talked about and that Jonathan and Sam talked about are on the resource hub. And I suspect the pets one will be up there within the next couple of days. But I think what we've done there is we've gathered examples from local authorities about what's worked well and what has made life good for their care leavers, both care leavers and children in care, and put them on the resource hub. So you'll have the link to that to use and chase down and have a review of. And the next slide, Richard, please. So yep, there's the resource hub, the resource bank, where we've shared our examples, and also on there we will be putting the final report called The Story of New Belongings, which we're hoping will be out in the next few days. Will be on the resource hub as well, which has got lots of case examples and snippets of similar things that other authorities have been doing, but hopefully will give you a little taste of what how other authorities develop those ideas slightly differently. And the final slide I just want to come to is to say that we have one further presentation or webinar that we're doing, which is the same time, same place actually, next week. So Wednesday, 12 to 1:30. And that's going to look at how we support the emotional health and well-being of care leavers, and very similar format. Some presentations from ourselves at Quorum about what some of the issues were, some of the findings were, but also an opportunity to hear from 3 different local authorities about some of the great work that they've done. And I think, you know, that this, you know, like like Jeanette has talks about, it's sort of having a range of responses. So, you know, hopefully there'll be something in there that you'll all be able to listen to and think it'd be really good if we could work to develop that in our authority. So I hope you're able to join us next week. I can see the details going into the chat now. So yeah, finally, just want to say big thanks to my colleagues for sharing and leading on this event today, but particularly to Jeanette and to our colleagues Jonathan and Sam from Hertfordshire about their presentations. Hope you've all enjoyed it and really look forward to seeing you all again next Wednesday for a session on emotional health and well-being. Thank you all very much indeed. I think we're just down to us now.
We're still recording, Ian.
Oh, pretty good, that's why.